Rogue Trader enters the Combat Patrol arena. We get a full backstory of Lieutenant Titus of the Ultramarines and famous Space Marine and Space Marine 2 video game series, plus a full battle report of Middle-earth in celebration of the 20th anniversary of the Lord of the Rings Return of the King. That, plus loads of new missions and a lot more in White Dwarf issue 498. All right, jumping right over to our letter from the editor. Hi, Lyle. He talks about all these new Combat Patrol missions, Age of Sigmar missions, Warcry missions, all kinds of new stuff going on in this issue. So if you do play a lot of the skirmish games, you may be interested in picking this one up because, again, there's just a bunch of new stuff in here. Seems like the White Dwarf team is also always asking for feedback, so if you like the missions, or I guess if you hate them too, you can always let them know at team@whitedwarf.co.uk. Under the contact page, the model of the month is a beautifully painted Be'lakor. Absolutely stunning use of airbrushing here. Really cool spot details like on the wings where it just sort of adds this dappling. That looks really great. Plus excellent use of object source lighting to get that lit look from above like he's coming out of like the maw of hell. It's absolutely beautiful, great color contrast variant. Moving on to the bunker update, starting with the last issue, they started a crusade campaign. That did also include combat patrols, and in here we're moving on to phase 2. Now for how they did, it seems like the defenders came out well ahead this time in phase 1, but points have all been reset and we're going to see what happens into phase 2. The rules for playing Crusade are listed in here. So you would use the Crusade Tyrannic War or the Crusade Pariah Nexus rules, and then in the last issue and this issue of White Dwarf, there are some additional rules that you apply to that, and then otherwise you just play your games like normal. And the March painting challenge is to paint elite units. The new 40K mission is called Fel Tides. The special situation in it is called Unpredictable Flux, so it's basically more moving objectives. So at the beginning of each battle round, depending on how many victory points and such you have, you roll a dice and you see whether or not the alpha or omega objective markers move toward your battlefield edge or away from your battlefield edge, basically. Age of Sigmar gets a historical battle plan called Siege of the Genesis Gate. And Combat Patrol gets a new mission called Encroaching Shadows. Okay, on to basic training. So, Stephen Box talks about charging, more charging in this, and we've talked about charging in prior issues, but this expands on that idea, especially when it comes to charging for non-murdering reasons. So there's multiple reasons why you might want to charge the enemy, even if you don't think you're going to kill them. The primary reason, especially in 10th edition, is to get closer to objective markers, especially if the unit charging has a higher OC stat than the enemy model. So even if you charge into them and probably not going to do well, but can hopefully survive being fought back against, then theoretically you can take that objective in that round. So that could come in clutch at the last minute. There's also tactics like charging just to get in the way. The idea of charging, monsters or vehicles so that they get a -1 to the ballistic skill, or they have to disengage if they want to get somewhere. You can sort of stymie where the opponent is going by charging your unit in there, even if those models are not going to be able to eliminate the thing they are charging. So of course, charging gives you the Fights First ability. However, if you are charging something that also has the Fights First ability, you're probably going to have to get hit first. So things to avoid when you are charging your units in, especially when you run tiny little Astra Militarum dudes that probably aren't going to survive being fought back against. I know for my part in running Astra Militarum, I rarely ever think about charging, and it's probably something I should consider more, especially because it does kind of play like a meat grinder, which I don't really want to do, but you've got to get your troops out there and either onto objectives or tying the enemy up. So I pretty much never have the Fights First ability natively, so it's something that I always have to remember whether or not my opponent has or not, because my boys are not going to survive that. I don't know what you guys think of it. I mean, I know I've heard different feedback on what your favorite articles are. Do you use the basic training? Is that something you have found helpful to refer to? Or maybe even a better question is, how do you generally improve your skills if you are not actively playing 40K? Do you watch battle reports? Do you read battle reports? Or do you just talk about it or just think about it in your mind and like imagine the whole game ahead of time and then just get smarter? Like, I don't know. Let me know in the comments. All right, so moving on over into the hobby hangout, Emily talks about picking a color scheme for your army, and she provides a handy dandy color wheel, which is always helpful to refer to because it's really easy to, in my opinion, it's really easy to add too many colors to a model, but it is really cool to see colorful models. So how do you do it tastefully? And that's when you kind of want to refer to something like a color wheel or figure out if you're wanting to contrast strong colors with neutral colors. And she kind of goes over painting with test models and trying different schemes and taking what you like from different test models to combine it into an ideal scheme. She's also a really big fan of writing down your formula, whatever process or paints you used to paint a specific model or unit, so that you can refer back to that in the future. So it seems like a lot of people are excited about this. Combat Patrol now has a list for Vantarrion's Voidsmen, which are a rogue trader group. So you actually have a rogue trader list that you can use in Combat Patrol now, and it comes with a little short story of what the team looks like, and then the models themselves and you know, the different ways they play as usual. And after that fun addition, the next article talks about multiplayer Combat Patrol, which includes 3 and 4 player ways of playing it. Now you can have a 3-player, every man for himself, all versus all, or you can have a 4-player, everyone for themselves, or 2-on-2. Plus it gives you 6 new Combat Patrol missions to enjoy or test that out with. Well, have you ever wanted to know the deep history and lore of Lieutenant Titus of the Space Marines video game? I mean, of the Ultramarines? Well, you don't have to wait any longer. It is right here, a delightful history of Lieutenant Titus from a young whippersnapper being, you know, inducted into the training program of Space Marine Scout, to undergoing his entire transformation to a Space Marine, to rocketing through the ranks by being just an absolutely amazing example of the Ultramarines, to disappearing into secrecy under Inquisitor Thrax, who suspected him of heresy and kept him hidden away from people forever until he was sussed out, murdered, bad things happened to him, and Lieutenant Titus was sort of discovered again way later, but he didn't initially come back as an Ultramarine. He actually worked under a Death Watch, and then he kind of came back after being discovered again by the Ultramarines, and it's this amazing heroic tale. It's just really fun to read. And at the end of it, it's like, by the way, check him out in Space Marine 2, the video game. I'm like, oh yeah, I love that game. So, you know, this I think is a really good way of getting excited for that again. Moving on to Stilled Faith Part 3, so obviously the 3rd installment of this Stilled Faith story, and I believe this is the conclusion of that 3-part story. The Inquisitor is saved by the Space Marines, but only after kind of pulling off this really wild psychic feat. Unfortunately, the Space Marines are not really able to glean any important information regarding the stilling that is occurring on this planet. Damn Gene Stealer cults. Okay, so if you are a fan of Kill Team and Eldari, this issue has a 15-page comprehensive guide to fielding Eldari in your Kill Team games. So these are the Blades of Khaine, which I believe are the striking scorpions aspect of the Aspect Warriors, as different from the current Kill Team out, which is the Corsair Voidsguard. I didn't know if any of you out there are actually playing either of the Eldari Kill Teams. Although one thing that kind of occurs to me in looking at these is, why don't we see a Harlequin kill team. I mean, that feels like a bit of an obvious move. It would be relatively compact, really beautiful models you can shove in there, small model count, really fun to paint. Are they just not really popular right now? Are they not very good? I mean, I know they're all kind of under the one umbrella now of Eldari, but don't you think a Harlequin kill team would be kind of fun to see? Now we enter into the Tale of 4 Warlords, which I really just enjoy seeing because the 4 Warlords are always building up their lists and developing cool little stories for each of their armies. We've got Jake with his Slaves to Darkness, Sebastian with his Cities of Sigmar, which are the cool fighting troops, not necessarily the Sigmarites, but the other guys. And in fact, I really love the paint scheme on here because they remind me of the Night's Watch from World of Warcraft in Darkshire. And it's just a really fun look, especially since they are from Lethis, which is kind of the city that Nagash is always sieging because they're sort of alive despite Nagash's like attempts on them. It's like a very defiant city. So I always thought that was actually really cool. Laura bringing her Soulblight Grave Lords, all of the creepy, crawly undead, and beautiful conversion work. And Chris with the Gloomspite Gits, which just make you smile every time you see them. He has a Moon Squigger. It's this brightly colored yellow squig. Everything about it is just delightful. Then we move on to an article called The Beasts of the Galletian Depths. So it is an area of Gur, which if you watched my Nova coverage narrative, that big campaign took place in Gur. It's a bestiary, a short bestiary of the creepy crawly, gigantic monsters that run around in this part of Gur. So there's the Arachnarok spider, which is, like the size of a small building. The Galletian land kraken, which was a joy to read about, just crawling around, chasing you on land. You think they're limited to the sea? Nope, there's no safety in Gur. And then, of course, the lantern great moth also made me really smile. It's this gigantic moth, as you would imagine, and its little front antenna take on the shape of lanterns with lights in them, and it lays on the ground and just has its little anglerfish lights out there waiting for visitors to come inspect what's going on. And it can also sort of mimic sort of humanoid noises to attract prey, and then it eats you. Speaking of Age of Sigmar, there are now some additional rules for playing games 3,000 points and above. Unfortunately, I don't actually know much about Age of Sigmar, but there's a bunch of fun battle plans that you can play for your gigantic games, so bust out all those big models and have at it. In the last issue, I talked about a Cursed City campaign, a side quest of Baron Vaingulper, who is a local lord of Ulfenkarn. So that is the Cursed City. And there is a portion of Ulfenkarn that nobody goes to called the Clot because it is just covered in entrails, like complete monsters live there. It's utterly dangerous to be anywhere near. And, there's just constant blood and dismemberment basically happening. So Baron Vaingulper's job has now been to try and bring control to the Clot, and that started in the last issue as the first half of his side quest, and the second portion of that is now in this issue. So if you're playing Baron Vaingulper's missions, you will need both issues in order to complete all of his quests and hopefully bring some sort of order to that nasty part of town. And I did mention there are a bunch of new missions in this issue. Warcry also added some new rules for the warbands, the Wildcore Hunters, as well as the Gorger Maw Packs. That also comes with new missions that you can play with them, and cool new terrain rules for a Maw Pit, which looks really sweet. So the Maw Pit might look like a Starlight Pit, but I'm sure it's completely original. All right, then we move on to, in celebration of the 20th anniversary of the release of The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. That's so crazy. I remember seeing that in the theaters. So this mission reenacts the final battle in Return of the King with our Aragorn and all of the hero characters fighting at the Black Gate, as well as the separate mission of Frodo and Sam to get the ring dropped into Mount Doom. So it's basically a 6-person battle, 2v2 of Aragorn and company fighting against the orcs and the Mouth of Sauron and all of the creepiness there, and the sort of endless supply of orcs that sprawl in or crawl in through the Black Gate. And then the separate mission, one-on-one, of Frodo trying to fight off Gollum to get the ring dropped into the mountain. And, you know, it goes a little different than I remember from the movie, but it is an exciting battle to read. And if you've been following the Black Library segments, we are on to Volume 3 of Legacy of Defiance, where we follow the Tome Keeper Ushazar as he is trying to figure out what these invaders want from their homeworld. Like, they're being invaded right now. He's sent to the archives. He's trying to understand what it is they want so that they can deny the enemy this item. And he has kind of come across these words that have repeated themselves in different points in time in the archives. And they're all linked through people he knows, but he hasn't quite been able to work out why that is significant yet. So I'm hoping to see it concluded in the next issue, because I want to see how Ushazar handles this. It's sounding like it's getting really exciting. I like the Tome Keeper stories. All right, and that is it for White Dwarf issue 498. They did give a little tiny sneak peek of stuff to look forward to for issue 500. They were working on some sweet terrain at the back of this issue, so I know we can expect probably something major. It seems kind of AOS-y to me, but I guess we'll see. We're not very far away from seeing issue 500 now. Definitely let me know what your favorite part in the White Dwarf series is. I'd love to get your feedback on what you enjoy reading or what you enjoy hearing about. I mean, of course, if you've been here before, you know I'm a big fan of the Black Library series as well as all of the basic training. But there are some really impressive painting guides in here, some really cool spotlights on individuals who have been, one guy in here was trying to get his image of his model, or he'd been reading White Dwarf for 15 years and he finally got his model published in here, which was a really cool thing to see. It also kind of coincided with him having a child, which was really, really sweet. So just fun things to see of the community, I guess, in here. So anyway, all that to say, let me know what you think of these White Dwarf reviews, and make sure to give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you in the next video.